On today's show, the Houston Rockets split their pair of games against the Portland Trail Blazers this past weekend. What went so right to get the dominant win in Game 1? And then what went so wrong in the second meetup between these two teams? We're going to break it all down for you coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Thursdays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, where the best way that you can help us grow our show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing. Like and subscribe on YouTube. While you're there, drop us a comment. Just say, "Go Rockets," or tell us why you're frustrated about the Rockets' loss to the Blazers this past weekend. The comments help us out a ton. And also be sure to subscribe to the new daily Locked On Rockets newsletter. If you're watching on YouTube, there's a QR code in the bottom of the screen. Subscribe to the newsletter that way. It's fast, it's simple, and it helps us out a ton. Now, today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you so much for being one of our awesome everydayers. Well, the Rockets played 2 games against the Portland Trail Blazers. They won one of them in dominant fashion. They should have won the second one. And yet, somehow they lost it. We're going to break it all down for you here. And look, this is my mistake too, because they won the first game. And you know what? I thought to myself, I was like, it was Friday night. I had some plans for after the game. And then I had a stacked slate Saturday morning, afternoon, whatever. And I thought to myself, you know what? They'll pick up another win against the Blazers, and then it'll all be sunshine and rainbows, and I'll talk about it, for the Monday edition of the show. We'll just put we'll talk about both games in one pod. I thought to myself, surely they wouldn't lose against this Blazers team. There's no way. Not after that dominant win on Friday night. There's no way they turn around and lose on Saturday to the exact same team. Right? Right, guys? They get the 116-88 win on Friday in cup action, which is good. If you were going to lose one of these 2 games, at least they lost the one that was a little bit less meaningful. They now have a 2-0 record in cup play and have a whopping plus 49 point differential. So that's really helpful in case they drop one of these next 2 games, or possibly both of these next 2 games against the Minnesota Timberwolves and or the Sacramento Kings. The T-Wolves coming up Tuesday night. That's the Rockets' next bit of cup action. These next 2 cup games are going to be on the road. So look, they won the cup game, and they won it in dominant fashion. They lost the following meetup, 104-98. Look, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the win. Got to talk about Dillon Brooks' performance, kind of the message that he shared about how the mantra for this Houston Rockets team post-game. Going to get into that stuff. And then talking about the loss, I'm going to empty the clip on this team. I don't care. This loss was embarrassing. So let's start with the good stuff. We'll get the good vibes out of the way first. 116-88 win. And look, this was a game where the Rockets just flat out outclassed the Blazers. They just did. They looked like the better team from the jump. They limited all of the Blazers starters. Only 2 starters broke double figures. They limited 3 of the starters to single digits. Jeremy Grant didn't crack 5 points. Donovan Clingan was in foul trouble, and he only had 9 points. Anthony Simons only 8 points on 2 of 7 shooting. They did a great job limiting all of the key pieces for the Blazers. And then on the other end, Dillon Brooks had arguably one of his best games of his career as a member of the Houston Rockets. He had 28 points, 10 of 15 shooting, 6 of 8 from downtown, which is a welcome sight to see, especially after how poorly he shot the basketball against the Indiana Pacers just 1 game before this. He had 6 rebounds, had an assist. He was dominant. And there was a stretch of the game where, for God knows what reason, Chauncey Billups decided to put Donovan Clingan, switch him on to Dillon Brooks defensively for whatever reason. And DB just took multiple possessions in a row to absolutely cook Donovan Clingan from the perimeter. He drilled back-to-back threes in the third quarter over Donovan Clingan, and then he had a play where he drove into the left baseline, I should say, and hit like a tough little contested midi pull-up. had a little personal 8-0 run that he went on. But DB, he set the tone. Let me rephrase. He sets the tone every night defensively for this Houston Rockets team. And then on top of that, when he has an offensive game like this, it's no wonder you look at him and at least after this first game against the Blazers, I don't know the updated stats after the loss, but after this first game against the Blazers, Dillon Brooks was ranked second in the entire NBA in straight up plus minus. The only player with a better plus minus than Dillon Brooks after this first game against the Blazers was Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. That is a really impressive statistic, and it showcases just how crucial and important Dillon Brooks has been to this Houston Rockets team. So for anybody clamoring, hey, why don't the Rockets start Tari Eason over Dillon Brooks or yada yada whatever? Like, DB has been and continues to be the Rockets' most consistent player this season, arguably most consistent and maybe most impactful. I'm not ready to go quite that far yet, because you look at how things look when Fred has a really off night, and obviously Sengun has been the Rockets' best player so far this season, and Shingun's impact cannot be understated either, especially with his improved defense, which, speaking of, I got the chance to ask Dillon Brooks about Alp's improved defense this season, and the first words out of his mouth were, "I'm on his ass every day." And you can tell there's like a great relationship between Dillon Brooks and Alperen Sengun, and how highly Dillon views Alp and his abilities as a basketball player, which is why he pushes him so hard. But he talks about Alperen Sengun being the anchor for this team defensively, right? Being that presence, blocking shots, having that spirit to fight on the defensive end, and having the defense kind of ignite his offense at times, kind of paraphrasing here, but that's more or less what Dillon Brooks said about Alperen Sengun's defense after this first game against the Blazers. And he also shared one other little tidbit post-game that I thought was awesome. Great vibes, great mentality, great mantra for this Houston Rockets team to have. And Dillon said that one of their sayings that they share amongst each other is sometimes you, sometimes me, and always us. And that's their mentality. And that if they embrace that mentality and continue to embrace that mentality, that this Rockets team is going to be really good. And honestly, that's pretty true of this Rockets team. Now, he followed that up by saying, it could be JG's night, it could be Fred's night, it could be my night, it could be Jabari's night. He then goes on to say Alp brings his game every night. He had a little bit of a smile on his face when he said that, right? So again, DB thinks very highly of Alperen Sengun and his production and his role on this team. That being said, I agree. It's great that on any given night, anybody can step up for this Houston Rockets team. And you do look down the list, right? And you can extend that to the Terra twins off the bench, right? It could be Tari's night. It could be a men's night. There's so many different guys who can step up and have a big game for this Rockets team. It's also a little bit of what's wrong with this Rockets team. It's a great quote, and it's a great mentality to have for a team that has to be better than the sum of its parts on most nights to be able to win games, right? You look at the sum of its part, you look at up and down this Rockets roster, and individually, these guys don't stand out head and shoulders above the competition, right? The Rockets don't have like a 1A star on their team. They've got Alperen Sengun, who's their best player, and he's the closest thing they have. And he's continuing to build and grow his game, and maybe he'll get there one day, but he's not quite there yet. And then you need one other guy on any given night to step up and be that running mate for Alp to have a chance to win games. And in this game against the Portland Trail Blazers, it was actually a collective effort, right? The Rockets had enough contributions. Dillon Brooks led the way with 28 points. Tari had 22 off the bench. Thompson filled up the stat sheet and was great defensively, locking guys down. Fred had a disappearing act, 2 points, but 8 assists. Jalen Green had 17 points, but it took him 17 shots to get there. So the Rockets have been able to have success despite their inconsistencies kind of across the board, because they've been able to rely on, multiple different guys stepping up out of their top 7, top 8 guys. And that's great. It's worked so far. But in the rematch against the Blazers, we saw just how ugly it can get when we don't get that second guy to step up and help out Alperen Sengun. We're going to talk about the loss against the Blazers here in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Skims. Look, we all wear underwear every single day, but if you're like me, you probably found like one brand, one style of underwear a long time ago and decided, you know what? this is good enough, right? I've been rocking the same kind of underwear, not the same pair of underwear every day. Shout out to everybody who wants to give me hell in the comments, but I've been rocking the same brand of underwear for a while and just really never thought much of it until I got the chance to try Skims, Skims does men's underwear now. And look, I got the stretch 5-inch boxer brief. I prefer boxer briefs. They're comfy, they're snug, and look, at the end of the day, for me, they're the best pair of underwear that I've ever worn. It puts every single other brand to shame. They hit right in the thigh. They're comfortable. They don't stretch out, right? Sometimes you buy other briefs and like you wash them, a few different times and suddenly start to bag open. They look like a flag and just whatever. They don't give you that 5 p.m. wedgie that sometimes sneaks up on you late in the end of the day. If you're a boxer brief guy like me, you've got to try out Skims and you've got to try out their cotton 5-inch boxer brief. So shop Skims men's at skims.com/LockedOnNBA. Let them know we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select our show in the drop-down menu that follows. And if you're looking for the perfect gifts for the whole family this holiday season, Skims just launched their biggest holiday shop ever, also available at skims.com/LockedOnNBA. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, let's talk about this frustrating 104-98 loss to the exact same team that the Rockets pummeled the night before. And look, I could point to a lot of different things in this game. I could point to a bunch of different statistical categories as to why the Rockets lost with one, namely the three-point shooting. That one was brutal. Blazers, 18 of 44 from three, 40.9%. Rockets, 8 of 32, 25%. I could just say that's basically the game, but it's not. Blazers were plus 30 from three. And what did Mike say in our crossover episode, right? Mike said that for the Blazers to win, they're going to have to shoot the lights out of the basketball. And they did that. Their backcourt was sensational. Anthony Simons, 4 of 11. Shaedon Sharpe, 4 of 9. And Ant hit the really big three to go up 3 with just under a minute to play. So the shooting was definitely in favor of the Blazers, plus 30 from downtown. That's really hard to overcome. But the Rockets have done that a lot this season. They've beaten teams that have shot the lights out of the basketball when they haven't. And it's because they didn't win at the margins in other areas that the Blazers did. The Blazers beat the Rockets at their own game. They out-rebounded the Rockets 53-43. Offensive glass, 16-14. And second chance points. Blazers were plus 6 in second chance points, 18-12. I don't know if it's happened so far this season. I don't know if the Rockets have actually been on the lesser end of second chance points at all this season. I'd have to go back and dig through all the games to remind myself. But the Rockets are a gritty defensive team that relies on offensive rebounding and forcing turnovers and getting out and running in transition. They forced turnovers against the Blazers. They did enough, by way in the second game, I should say, of forcing turnovers and getting out and running. They forced 18 turnovers and they scored 18 points off of those 18 turnovers. So they did well enough defensively. You hold a team to 104 points. You did more than enough defensively to win this game. The Rockets they've had these games where their offense just completely dries up and they just cannot get anything going offensively. And it's hard not to look at the backcourt and how bad they were in this game to think that that's why the Rockets lost. The Rockets lost this game because Fred VanVleet and Jalen Green did not show up. That's just it. And I'm going to focus on Fred VanVleet here first. And I'll talk about Jalen in our next and final segment. Actually, well, for both of them here, Jalen, 10 points, 3 of 14 shooting, 1 of 9 from downtown. Got to the free throw line 4 times, hit 3 of them, had a couple rebounds, couple assists, and a steal. Very quiet night, very unimpactful offensive game for Jalen Green. And then Fred, even worse. 8 points, 4 of 13 shooting, 0 of 6 from downtown. He had 5 rebounds, 5 assists, and a steal, and 3 turnovers, many of which were uncharacteristic turnovers for Fred VanVleet, a guy who takes care of the basketball at an elite level, turned the ball over not once, not twice, but 3 times in this game against the Blazers. And so look, you can look up and down this Rockets roster and look, Sengun did his job in this game. 22 points, 5 boards, 5 assists, couple steals, 8 of 11 at the free throw line, 7 of 17 overall. Sengun was leading the way and trying to be that consistent scoring factor for the Rockets offensively. They were playing through him a lot late in this game. Dillon Brooks, 13 points, 5 of 11 shooting. Only 1 of 3 from downtown, though. Some of those threes from Jalen and Fred should have gone to Dillon, especially considering he was off the heels of a 6 of 8 3-point shooting performance against literally the exact same team. Don't know how he didn't get more attempts here. And then Jabari Smith Jr., 14 points, only 3 of 10 shooting, but it was 3 of 7 from downtown. And he got fouled a handful of times, got to the free throw line, hit 5 of 6 there, had 8 rebounds, had an assist, had 3 block shots. He had 1 really monster block in this game. So it was a solid performance from Jabari and from Dillon. Sengun, a good enough performance to win the game. The backcourt was just awful. By comparison, Anthony Simons and Shaedon Sharpe combined for 49 points in the Blazers backcourt. Jeremy Grant also added 22 on the wing, but 49 points out of the Blazers backcourt compared to just 18 points by the Rockets backcourt. That's just not good enough to win games. It's not. When you're $40-something million a year point guard and you're newly signed to a 3-year, $100 million extension two guard of the future, can only give you 18 points on 7 of 27 shooting, you're not going to win many games, if any at all, with those two guys playing that way. But focusing on Fred for a second here and what made his game so frustrating. He was taken completely out of the game in the first half. Fred was in foul trouble for a majority of the first half. He only played of 24 available minutes in the first half. Fred only played 6 minutes and 40 seconds. He played about a quarter of the available minutes in the first half compared to his normal, anywhere from 18 to 20 minutes that he would normally play, if that, right? Especially it being a close game and the Rockets playing from behind and really struggling in this one, right? They were down by as many as 9 in the first half. They clawed back without Fred. They clawed back and made it a 2-point game at halftime. They roared back. They took the lead in the third quarter. They were leading 65-60, and it looked like they'd wrestled the momentum away from the Blazers, and it looks like they looked like they had finally taken control of the game a little bit. The Blazers go on their run, and I will say I think one mistake that Ime made was leaving Sengun in the game for too long. In that third quarter, he looked a little gassed near the end of the third quarter. I thought that led to some defensive lapses, some blown opportunities in that quarter, or at least during the Sengun's final stretch in the third quarter. And then even in the fourth quarter, the Rockets were on top. The Rockets were winning this game. They roared back. They tied the game up multiple times late. They took the lead off of an Amin Thompson, Alperen Sengun little 2-man game play. And it looked beautiful. They were leading 96-94. Anthony Simons comes down and very little resistance scores a layup to tie the game up. And then next possession down, Alperen Sengun gets blocked by Deni Avdija. And then Anthony Simons comes down and knocks down a ridiculous step-back three-pointer and gives the Blazers a 3-point cushion. Now, this is where I take some exception, and I think that Ime is a little bit at fault here for some of the play calling down the line. Rockets are down 3 with 27.2 on the clock, and they run a play for Alperen Sengun. And he scores on this play, but it's too little too late because you're playing the free throw game at this point, 99-98. And Blazers come back down. Deni Avdija gets fouled, makes the free throws, makes both of them. There's 16.1 on the clock. Rockets still have a timeout, mind you. I don't know why they didn't call the timeout here. Instead, they elect to inbound the ball. Fred VanVleet drives the ball up the length of the court. Fred feels contact on him, so he flings up a prayer. Refs don't call it in the moment. Now, after the fact, Courtney Kirkland, the lead officiator, the crew chief, did point out that it should have been ruled a foul in the moment. That being said, I still hate that play. That is an awful play. Down 3, and you're gonna rely on putting the game in the hands of the refs to try and bait a 3-point foul down 3 on like a driving wild, looking shot. It wasn't like a real 3-point attempt. It was Fred was seeking the contact, felt the contact, and tried to embellish to get the foul. And even though the ref said it should have been called a foul, it wouldn't have been for 3 shots. It would have been for 2 free throws. And Fred's been missing free throws left and right this season, so I don't even feel incredibly confident in him going to the line and knocking down 2 free throws to make it a 1-point game again. But even worse than that, Rockets had a timeout. They could have, you didn't do it on the possession before that? Fine. call a timeout, draw up a play, draw up a quick trigger inbound, and immediately elevate for three. Because guess what? If the Blazers do try to foul you and you're pulling the trigger on a three, that's 3 free throws. Or if they don't foul you and they just let you play on, right? If Billups isn't one of those coaches that fouls when they're up 3, then guess what? You get a look at a 3. And if you knock it down, you force overtime or you give yourself one more possession to play defense. I do not know what the decision-making at the end of this game between Ime and between Fred was mind-bogglingly frustrating. And Fred, very frustrated, I'm guessing, with his own performance, but also frustrated with the officiating, went out of his way at the end of this game to go up to each and every ref, put a finger in their face. He almost made contact with one of the refs, and to verbally disparage them and got ejected from this game. Fred is not going to be suspended, which is a good, welcome bit of news for this team moving forward. But still, just a complete emotional meltdown and letdown from the Rockets' leader on the floor in Fred VanVleet, who struggled with foul trouble in the first half, could not get himself going at all in the second half, and then took it upon himself to try and force the issue at the end of the game, and it was a bad call. It was the wrong play. Ime should have called timeout. They should have drawn something up, and they could have had a chance to have a realistic shot at tying this game or potentially winning it, right? Forcing overtime and winning it there rather than whatever that Hail Mary was that Fred VanVleet threw up. Look, this is a very different circumstance than like a couple games ago when we were talking about the loss against the Bucks where Giannis was standing out of bounds. That call literally decided the game. If Fred gets this call, it just turns into a free throw routine, right? Fred goes to the free throw line. I don't even know if he's going to knock down both, but let's say he does knock down both, right? Then the Blazers come down, they get fouled. You're hoping that they miss. I hate that at the end of a game. Give yourself a better shot to win the game. And it's, fact of the matter at the end of the day, the Rockets shouldn't have even been in this position to begin with. They shouldn't be in a dogfight at the end of regulation, relying on the mercy of officials or trying to play the free throw game with Denny Avdia to try and win a game against Portland. They shouldn't have been there. This team is too talented and too good to be in these types of games anymore. That's just it. And the reason they were in this game, the reason they struggled so poorly is the backcourt did not show up. Fred didn't show up, and he blew it at the end, and Jalen didn't show up and was a non-factor at the end of this game. That's your answer for why the Rockets lost to the Blazers in Game 2 of this little mini-series over the weekend. Coming up, I want to shine a light on Jalen Green. Because after a 5-game start to the season where he looked like he was going to become an all-star, it's been anything but since then. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one spot. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the exact same page where you actually place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. And while you're there, take a look at all the different odds available. You can check out their parlay builder, check out the different season awards favorites, or the outright favorites to win this year's Super Bowl. Right now, the Lions creeping up the list. They're creating some space here. Plus 300 to win it all. The Chiefs plus 500. The Eagles plus 650. Also right there, the Bills at plus 650. And rounding up the top 5, the Ravens at plus 750. So for all those odds and so much more, head on over to FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Look, Game Time is the best way to buy tickets for any event happening near you. You want to go to a Rockets game? Get yourself tickets on Game Time. But it doesn't have to be a sporting event. It could be a theater event, a comedy show, a concert. Game Time has tickets to all sorts of events. And with their Game Time Picks feature, it filters out the fluff to only show you incredible deals on great seats. So you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of different ticketing offers. But they've got a bunch of great features. They've got their ticket covers, their lowest price guarantee, views from your seat, so you know exactly what to expect when you get to your venue. My personal favorite is their all-in pricing feature. When you download the Game Time app, you toggle on the all-in pricing feature. They're fully transparent from start to finish. They don't surprise you with like hidden fees or anything along the way. So take the guesswork out of buying your tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Now, before we get into the Jalen Green stuff here in this segment, you might think to yourself, Jackson, you're overreacting. It's one loss. It's okay. It was only 6 points, whatever. These are the types of losses that come back to haunt teams at the end of the regular season when you're vying for playoff positioning, when the Rockets are fighting to either be in the play-in tournament or to escape and not be in the play-in tournament, to finish as the 5th or the 6th seed in a Western Conference. It's going to be a bloodbath. We're going to go back and we're going to look at games like the Hornets loss, or like the Spurs loss, or like this loss against the Blazers, two of those 3 losses coming at home on your own home court. It's unacceptable. Good teams don't have these kinds of losses. They don't. And this Rockets team is past being handheld. They're past being babied. This is a team that wants to be a competitive playoff team. This is one of the best teams in the NBA so far this season. And I'm going to hold them to that standard. This is not the standard that the Houston Rockets have set for themselves this season. To lose to a Blazers team, to get out-rebounded, to be completely outshot, to have a backcourt completely outplayed by the opposing Blazers backcourt. It's unacceptable. So with that, I'm worried about Jalen, guys. He had a strong start to the season. His first 5 or 6 games looked incredible. He really did look. It looked like it was Jalen Green's team. It looked like he was taking over. And you couple that with the fact that Sengun was struggling out of the gate, and it kind of looked like, oh wow, okay, well, it's a good thing Jalen is looking like an all-star this season, because Sengun might have regressed. Thankfully, Sengun is back to looking like himself, and unfortunately, Jalen Green's back to looking like himself too, because he's been anything but an all-star over the last, few weeks, really. The Rockets have played now 18 games this season. Jalen was really, really good for the first 5, maybe 6 games. And it's been really ugly since then. I'm not even going to crunch the numbers over the specific 12 or 13 game sample size that I have here. I'm just looking at his raw season totals, which includes his strong start to the season. So keep that in mind as we read out these numbers. Jalen Green on the season is shooting 38.2% from the floor. He's shooting 30.7% from downtown. 45.5% from two-point land. These are career lows across the board, percentage-wise, for Jalen Green. The only place that he doesn't have a career low, he's shooting 85.1% from the free throw line. But he's also damn near a career low in free throw attempts. Only 3.7 free throw attempts per game. The lowest of his career was 3.5 attempts per game his rookie season. He's down. He had 6.1 attempts his sophomore campaign and 4.3 attempts last season. He's down in raw free throw attempts. Jalen Green leads the team in field goal attempts per game at 17 per night. He leads the team in usage rating at 26.6%. Alperen Sengun is right behind him at 26.2%. When is the last time that you have ever seen a player with percentages this bad leading a team in field goal attempts and usage rating? I don't know when it happened. You'd have to probably point to a tanking team. You'd have to point to one of the worst 5 or bottom 3 teams in the association to find a team with a player playing this poorly on offense that is also simultaneously leading the team in usage rating and field goal attempts. It makes no sense. And it's frustrating because despite Jalen Green's play, the Rockets have still been one of the best teams in the NBA. Because they've been that flat out dominant, because Sengun's been good, because the Tara twins have been absolutely sensational off the Rockets bench, because Dillon Brooks has been one of the most consistent players in the entire NBA this season. And because Fred VanVleet, after his rough start to the year, finally turned it around and started having these monster games where he just turns it on to start the game and he's just scoring at an elite rate, or comes out of the halftime, comes into the third quarter and just takes over the game there. Fred's been sensational in these games, except for this one that we talked about just a moment ago. Jalen just has to be better. There's no sugarcoating it. There's no hand-holding. There's no pulling any punches this year. You got your contract. You are being paid as one of the best players on this team. You got a $100 million contract, and you got extended. The ink is dry on that contract. Sengun got his contract too. These guys got paid this offseason. The expectations are here, and they are here to stay. There is no more give him time, let him develop. He's still figuring it out. He had last year for all of that. What is going on? And at the end of the day, here's the problem. Jalen Green just might be who he is. He might just be a really inefficient, streaky scorer. And when the streak is on, when he's knocking down shots, he looks unguardable. He looks like he might be a future all-star player. But they're few and far between. We are approaching a quarter of the way through the season already. We're 18 games in. 2 more games in, we've hit a quarter of the season. And if he doesn't turn, and through these first 18 games, 5 of them have been good, 13 have been really awful. And yes, you still factor in, yes, the improved defense is there. Yes, the playmaking has improved, the decision-making has improved a little bit. But with what other star players do we do this? With what other star players? Do you look at any of the other 29 organizations and think, oh, well, he's shooting sub 40% from the floor and he's shooting 30% from 3, but his decision-making is really good. He's a little bit of a better defender this year. Oh, his playmaking, he's averaging, what's he even averaging? 2.7 assists per game. It's not even anything to write home about from the facilitating standpoint. This Rockets team as a whole cannot shoot the basketball. They struggle across the board to shoot the ball, and they have to start this season. But I don't know if this is a slump for Jalen. This just might be who he is as a player. And if it is, then the Rockets got to find a solution to it, because you're not going to be able to win if the guy that you're paying to be your star 2 guard can't put the ball in the bucket. It's that simple. It's a very simple equation. And at the end of the day, even despite all these other struggles, the Rockets and their starting lineup in particular has still been one of the best starting 5 lineups in the entire NBA, despite Jalen's inefficiency. So maybe that's why they're not looking to make a change anytime soon, whatever. But it's all the more frustrating because you see just how good and at times just how dominant this Rockets team has been, despite everything that they've got going against them, despite the fact that they're not able to shoot the basketball up and down the roster. They've got one of the worst effective field goal percentages in the entire NBA. The fact that Jalen Green is posting career lows across the board when it comes to his efficiency. And yet, the Rockets are still one of the best teams in the NBA. It makes you think how good this team could be if you actually had like a star level guard to pair with Alperen Sengun. Because here's the problem. At the end of the day, it should be Alperen Sengun and Jalen Green leading this Rockets teams to wins. That's what it should be. That's what it should look like on a nightly basis. Fred VanVleet should be playing an ancillary role to Jalen Green. Fred VanVleet was not brought in to be the guy. He was not brought in to be the elite premier creator guard, whatever the team. He was brought in to be the training wheels. He was brought in to be the vet. He was brought in to play good defense, to set the table, to put guys in positions to be successful. Fred has had to shoulder a much bigger offensive load this season than he should have. And that's in part to Jalen Green, due to Jalen Green's inefficiency. It should be Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun leading the Houston Rockets to wins. It shouldn't be Fred VanVleet and Alperen Sengun doing it. And on a night like this against the Blazers, where Fred completely had an off game, right? Jalen wasn't up to task to take over for him. And it's frustrating. It is, because you paid Sengun and you paid Jalen. You paid them to be the faces of the franchise going forward. You paid them to be your go-to guys. They're supposed to be the guys doing the heavy lifting. They are. And yet, it's been Fred VanVleet time and time again, coming out in the first quarter, having a strong start to the game, dominating in third quarters, turning the tide of a game. And that's who Fred is, right? He's a former all-star for a reason. He's a top-tier NBA point guard for a reason. But that's not what the best version of this Rockets team looks like. The best version of this team is Jalen Green doing that. The best version of this team is Jalen Green turning the corner and playing an efficient brand of basketball and being consistent. And I thought we were past this. I really did, to start the season. But at what point do you look at a stretch of games and say, oh yeah, that's a slump? Is he slumping through a quarter of the season? Or is this just who he is as a player? I don't know at this point. And the Rockets are going to have to figure it out, though, because there are going to be more games like this. There are going to be games where Fred just doesn't have it, or he's having an off night. And if Jalen is not able to step up and carry the torch when Fred doesn't have it, first off, it should be Jalen carrying the torch every night. That should be the baseline for this team. Instead, Fred has to do the heavy lifting, and Jalen shows up when he can from the past, few weeks of play. And that's not how it should be, but that's how it's been. And this Rockets team is going to have so many more disappointing losses this season. Again, you might say, Jackson, you're overreacting. It's one loss. They're still a great team. They're still one of the best teams in the NBA. Yeah. How much better could they be if they weren't hamstringing themselves, right? How much better could they be if Jalen was playing consistent, efficient basketball? They would look like world beaters. They would look like a team that is bound to meet the Celtics in the finals, or the Cavs in the finals, because how good the Cavs have been this year, right? And that's why I beg you to look at this and think, I think we're past the point of waiting. The Rockets are not going to make any drastic, crazy moves at the deadline this season. I would bet a pretty penny that they probably stay stationary and they just keep this team as is and they do with what they can this year. But if we navigate this whole season and it's just another year of Jalen Green where he has a couple hot stretches throughout the season, maybe he has 1 month where he looks really, really, really good, but then more of the season is just more or less what we're seeing right now, he's not going to be a Houston Rocket next summer. He's not. He's playing for his future. He got his contract now, but now that he got his contract, it's very tradable. That was one of the things that we talked about when Jalen Green first signed the contract, is this contract makes him very tradable down the line. So if he underperforms this year, if he doesn't feel like one of the sticking pieces or one of the pieces that helped this team over the hump and win a bunch of games and one of the biggest contributing members of the success of this team this season, then he's not going to be around much longer. And again, the expectations are so much higher than they were last year. This is just the reality of the situation with where this team is at and what they want to achieve this year. Jalen has to be better. And his play so far this season, after that hot start to the year, has been very, very disappointing. So that's where things are at. It's frustrating. And I want to know your thoughts. How are you feeling about Jalen so far at this point in the season? And I can already hear it now too. I can hear people like, man, you never railed this hard on Jabari. First off, I kind of did. I mean, I straight up said that the Rockets should have to consider 15% shooting on wide open threes would be bench worthy on a lot of teams in the NBA. Jabari was flat out playing awful. But guess what? They're held to different standards. Jabari is not the same player that Jalen Green is. Jabari didn't just receive a payday. Jabari isn't expected to be one of the heavy hitters offensively for this Rockets team. What you get out of Jabari is what you get out of Jabari. He's an ancillary piece. He's a role player for this Rockets team. Jalen Green carries himself and acts like a star. Be a star. You want to be a star? Be a star. Go out there and take it. Be a star level player. Get to the free throw line. Draw fouls. Create for your teammates. Score more than 20 points in a game and do it on decent efficiency instead of taking 20 shots to get to 20 points. That's what star players do. Jalen Green has not been a star player since game 6 of this season. And thankfully he hasn't actively hurt the Rockets in many of those games, and the Rockets have still been able to win a lot of those games, but there's definitely this is bad, man. This is a bad performance. And there's going to be more of them coming around coming down the pipeline if Jalen can't get it figured out. So with that, that's going to do it for our episode. I want your thoughts. Tell me how you're feeling about this team. Tell me how frustrated this loss made you. Let me know all your thoughts in the YouTube comments. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. The best way you can help us grow our show, listen every single day on whatever podcast platform you choose. Like and subscribe on YouTube. Subscribe to the new daily Locked On Rockets newsletter. All that good stuff. But as always, appreciate you tuning in. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.